Hello everyone, welcome back to the Fascinating Womanhood channel, where we talk about all things that have to do with femininity and building strong, long-lasting, loving relationships. I'm Sherry Lynn, and I'm so excited to be here today with both of my parents, Dixie Andelin Forsyth and Dr. Robert Forsyth. Usually I'm here with my mom, and we do interviews, just the two of us remotely, but this has been a really wonderful opportunity for the three of us to sit down and talk about one specific subject. So the topic we chose to talk about today is, what is a narcissist? What does narcissistic behavior look like? And how can you as a woman in your relationship use Fascinating Womanhood principles to strengthen your marriage, knowing about his narcissistic behavior? This is a really challenging subject, and we spent a lot of time talking about it. I'm not in the camera for this one. I'm going to turn it around so that you can see them. So we're going to get started. So hope you enjoy. The first question that we have, what is narcissistic behavior?
Right.
I'm looking to you because you're the doc.
Well, I think that it's important to maybe understand that it comes from a Greek mythology. There was a man that was incredibly handsome, and I guess he was named Narcissus or Narcissus.
Yeah.
And he rejected any romantic interest in him, because one day he looked in a pool and he saw his reflection and he kind of fell in love with himself. So I guess the idea is the beginning of self-centeredness or something like that, or where everything's focused on you. I think the term narcissist has gotten a bit of a broad, maybe even bad rap, because you say, well, the guy's a narcissist. Well, I think that it's important to understand, I know from my work with narcissists, or maybe just a broad range of people, is that narcissism really is on a spectrum, or there's a range of narcissism. I guess I think of, on one end, you have healthy narcissism. You think, oh, is there such a thing? Yeah.
We talked earlier about how there's four main categories. Can we talk about all four of those categories? Because I thought that was really valuable when you explained that to me. And this is not something you can look up on the internet. Like, when you look up narcissist on the internet, it basically tells you that you're obsessed with yourself. That's not a very helpful definition.
Exactly.
And I thought our conversation that we had was really helpful because you kind of explain, and there might be more, but there's four kind of main areas or places on the spectrum of narcissistic behavior that ladies can kind of go, okay, he might be here versus way over here. You explain that?
Okay, let's kind of think of this as maybe four parts, perhaps. It's one way to look at it. You've got maybe the healthy narcissism on the one end, high-functioning narcissists, who are successful in some field, maybe very talented, and so on. Actually, children have narcissistic needs. I noticed my little granddaughter, when she goes into she loves to go to a shoe store, and she'll come in, sit down on the floor, and rip her shoes off and start trying on shoes. And she finds some cute little sparkly shoes, puts them on, and she loves to look in the mirror. And I think, okay, that's healthy narcissistic needs she's 2 years old, almost 3, and those are healthy narcissistic needs. Now, let's just go then a next step and say there's maybe another stage which might be called narcissistic traits, where a person maybe have several self-centered things that they do, and they're not necessarily just terrible. It's just that they're kind of annoying.
Well, could they be immature?
Yeah, they could be immaturity.
Or based on things from their past,
right?
Their childhood, or things they're trying to compensate for or get over.
Right.
Maybe they were abused as a child. And
I sometimes think maybe my father had some narcissistic traits. You say, because my mother sometimes would say, why is he so attention-seeking? He seems to have a big head. And I know that he came from a family, he was born in a family he had 7 brothers and 1 younger sister. And he was in the middle of that group, and I know that he often felt like he was a bit invisible. He had older brothers that were achievers, and and the younger ones seemed to get attention. He was kind of right in the middle, and nobody paid much attention to him. So it's almost like he was constantly trying to prove that he was valuable, or that he was competent, or that he could do things. I remember my mother would say, he's showing off, and I have to kind of try to stop him from getting a big ego or something like that. And I remember when I was younger, I thought, yeah, he kind of is a bit of a show off, or can get kind of taking over, maybe a social setting or something, telling jokes and stuff.
But knowing him like I did, he was a very good man.
Yeah,
he was a very good man. I thought that he just needed praise and didn't get enough in his personal life, so he would go out there and try to succeed. He was very ambitious and tried different things, and when it didn't work out, sometimes he felt ridiculed.
He ran for public office. I remember him getting up in front. We were there, and he got up in front of like probably 5,000 people and was essentially campaigning, and I could tell my mother was embarrassed because he seemed to be so willing to put himself out like that. And like I say, when I was younger, I remember thinking, yeah, this is a little bit embarrassing. But as I got older, I started to realize, I appreciate his willingness to try, at least to do something.
He's ambitious, which is very masculine.
Well, I often thought as I got older that, sometimes I think my mother trying to pull him down a notch almost made him more desperate and made him want to try harder to get validated. And I thought, if she would just say to him, I really admire your energy and your enthusiasm and your willingness your courage to do these things. If she had said that, I think he might not have been quite so desperate to go out and try to get attention. Maybe you could think of perhaps, maybe a movie star that's really talented. Mm-hmm. I have to say one that comes to my mind is Alec Baldwin. I've seen many of his movies, and really a talented person. But I think, reading things about him, I don't know him personally, but you kind of get the impression sometimes that he may be a bit self-centered or has kind of a big ego, and to say, okay, well, he's a narcissist. Well, he's a high-functioning narcissist, and yeah, he probably has some narcissistic traits that can be annoying to some people, maybe even an ex-wife or somebody, but he isn't necessarily diagnosed as a, say, dysfunctional or destructive. I think of those as kind of what I'd call sort of the trait narcissists are maybe vulnerable narcissists.
And they're still somewhat healthy.
Yeah, they're still functional.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
They may have some traits. They like to be the center of attention, want a lot of praise. They have to be right. They don't like to, look like they've made a mistake.
But they wouldn't be diagnosed in your office as narcissists.
No, not really. You might say, hey, there's some narcissistic traits here, but I got to say one thing is narcissists don't usually come to therapy.
Right.
They don't.
Someone else wants them in therapy.
Wait a minute, Linus, you're talking about my life. I pay for your life, David. My life makes your life possible. I resent that. So do I.
Therapy.
They don't need any help from their perspective. They think everybody else has the problem.
So didn't you say if they do, it's because a judge ordered them there?
Yeah, perhaps. Yeah. But usually it's part of something else. It may be narcissists sometimes overlap with sociopaths who get into criminal activities and so on. But let's just say you've got the healthy narcissism, and then you've got the traits, a few traits of narcissism. And like I say, those are not necessarily deal breakers or even so unusual. It's just that they can be irritating or they can be annoying to people. A wife may say, oh, he's always trying to get attention. My mother said, well, I don't want him to get a big head. I got to kind of keep him from getting too egotistical.
Or it's hard for them to say they were wrong.
Right.
Yeah. So then what's the third one?
Well, then there's probably another level where we might say, could we say a diagnostic narcissist? These are difficult people. They are so self-centered. These are the ones I was talking about a little bit ago that may really destroy relationships to some degree. But the real destructive narcissist, maybe the fourth category would be those who are truly aggressive, are abusive, who
Maybe criminal.
probably criminal. They may be, I think I mentioned, maybe like a sexual predator who just uses people, or maybe just, a person who's just taking advantage and just trying to, in a sense, almost destroy. Or you could say, well, they're not intentional, but they're so grandiose, they're just destroying everything that they almost touch.
You said earlier their relationships around them crumble.
Yeah.
I thought that was a good definition.
They
of
do.
that
They tend to
category.
crumble, and they tend to feed on drama. They seem to like a lot of almost turmoil. There's so much going on around them.
So if there's one in your life, chances are if there's a problem, they're kind of in the center.
You don't deserve her, but she appears to love you.
Yeah, see, doesn't that worry you a little bit? I mean, about her mental health?
In the center of it, stirring that pot.
Yeah, sometimes in your family, there may have been one person in your family who seemed to always be or have to be the center of attention. It's like they could not stand to share any of that with anyone else.
Perhaps some of our ladies out there don't know about, or maybe have not seen some of the extremes. And so maybe in their world, what they see when they see some narcissistic traits, they think that's
Makes them
as bad as it gets, when that actually clinically, that isn't what you
right.
would define as. If you test them, you don't define them as a quote narcissist. But I think some of the ladies are worried about men who are on the clinical side of personality disorder, which is, you're not talking about your dad being a disorder like
a narcissist that's destructive is going to probably destroy relationships. Maybe initially he's going to be charming. He might start a business, but he's probably going to have some pretty negative impact on that business over time because he's so self-centered. And people don't really like to follow someone with such a huge ego that there's almost no room for anybody else in there. To me, a person who can't really work with others or maybe share some of the limelight or show some reciprocity in their relationships is going to be really difficult in relationships and in business, in their life generally. It's going to have major impact on major life areas in a negative sense.
Can you talk a little bit about men versus women? Because what I looked up, just the brief things that I looked up on the internet, was that it's more common for men to be narcissistic. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think there's a tendency there because men tend to be a little more target oriented. By that I mean they're a little more focused on what they want. They tend to objectify things a little more, and they're more visual in their perspective of things, visual and action oriented. And so they're a little less relationship oriented. Testosterone actually blocks bonding chemistry. And so,
it doesn't eliminate it. But
it doesn't eliminate it, but it takes longer for a man to really get emotionally. I see some women say, well, I'm going to, make his life so exciting, he's never going to want to leave me. But guys really don't care. They're not, until he's emotionally involved with you, don't get thinking you're going to just, entrap him somehow with excitement and romance and one thing and another. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So what about the women that say, oh, he's a narcissist, I'm diagnosing that? What do you think about that?
To
Is that
me,
dangerous?
That's a little, that's such a complex question because she may be a bit narcissistic herself.
Oops.
And she may be projecting that onto him, or it may be that she's seeing some vulnerability or insecurity, and it's annoying to her, and she doesn't kind of know how to deal with it.
Well, she may not understand there's even healthy narcissism.
Right.
Right, or she may mistake sort of self-contained. What's the word? Kind of ambition. She may be looking at his ambitiousness or his drive, say, oh, he's narcissist. It's easy to throw that word around, and it's gotten a bit of a negative connotation. but it isn't necessarily all bad, and she needs to be a little careful to balance this out, partly with her own possible self-centeredness, but also with his, how much of this is really just him maybe trying to achieve and be competent and find his place in the world.
Seeing Bob in his practice all these years, I've also noticed that when people diagnose their spouse, they don't realize that for someone like him to diagnose people, he's had to have years of schooling. He does testing on people. He doesn't just talk to them for 5 minutes and say they're narcissistic. And there isn't just narcissistic, period. And there's this whole range. Some of it is healthy, some of it is annoying, like you said, and some of it is downright dangerous. And so if you diagnose somebody without really knowing, you do testing on people,
right.
And then has to learn how to diagnose those tests. It isn't like you can read it in a magazine and then do your own evaluation when you don't really know all the things it could be.
Right. Narcissists are charming. So initially, just on the surface, it's a little tricky to say. You say, oh, they're self-centered, and so on. But to really start to get into the deeper levels, those that are kind of sadistic, abusive, predatory, those are the ones that are a little trickier to figure out. But as I evaluate, I can start to see some of the different layers there that are going on and really truly make a diagnosis of it. But I think people, when somebody does something self-centered, oh, he's a narcissist. Well, that's easy to say. There's another thing I see with kids, because, oh, he's got ADHD, which may not necessarily be true. He may be very anxious and seems to be hyper or restless because he's got so much anxiety and stress in his life. And just to throw out, oh, he's this or he's that, you got to be a little careful about that. I would say I'm a little cautious about that.
Now, what do you think about men that are adulterers? Because I think adultery, we hear that so much in our group, women saying like, oh, my husband, whether it's an affair or whether it's even just flirting, like going dangerously towards an affair, maybe not quite there yet. The women are very quick to say he's a narcissist because he's doing this to me. What do you think about that? As an adulterer, always a narcissist?
No.
Not necessarily. I see what I would call sexual narcissists. They are so concerned about their, physical appearance, maybe their muscles, maybe their conquest,
Yeah.
their sexual prowess, and they need constant validation. And so they're out doing things of more of a abusive and predatory nature.
That's the more extreme.
That's the more extreme.
But then you have the other.
But I've seen maybe a man have an affair, which I don't think is an answer really ever. I sometimes see that with a man who maybe has been married for a while and he hasn't really invested that much in the relationship.
I should have paid more attention to you. I don't know what I was thinking of.
Yourself?
Maybe his wife hasn't really that much either. They've kind of got used to each other, take each other for granted. Sometimes something young and exciting comes along and because men are visual and they're kind of visual hunters, they kind of will, do something like that. But then they realize, gee, I've had them say to me, that was a mistake. I can't believe I was so stupid. I did that. I got involved with this person and all they wanted was, they were kind of narcissistic and wanted entertainment and so on. And they said it was a big mistake. So I can't say that they're always narcissists. They may be, but I think it's more of a pattern of things over time.
Well, also, don't you think, I've seen in Fascinating Womanhood, some men have affairs because they are so desperately unhappy in their marriage. They're not getting their needs met. Sometimes their wives refuse to have any intimate contact with them.
I've heard someone say, well, I've had children, I'm done with it. Yeah.
Right. So that puts a man in a very vulnerable position when you take him off the market. You marry somebody, you kind of take him off the market, and then his needs, you don't You don't help him with.
You have no interest in. I was going to say that I think sometimes a man may feel like he can't do anything right for her. I've had men say to me, everything I do is a mistake. She criticizes me. I feel like I'm just not good enough for her. And so if someone else comes along and gives them that validation, it's like it's almost impossible to resist.
Are women so quick to jump to this whole narcissistic thing? I don't get it. Women are very quick to jump to that conclusion.
It's so much easier to find fault in someone else than it is to look at yourself. And I know with Fascinating Womanhood, you say, really, you can't change another person. You've got to look at what you can do that makes a difference.
Well, you told me if he's the extreme on the narcissistic, like criminal, you're talking like that.
Sadistic,
abusive. The only answer is to get away from him.
Right.
But there's all this other range over here that you can do so much with, and most people aren't over here.
Right, and they aren't the same all the time. There may be occasional traits like that, but you could probably make a difference in how you look at something. If you can look for, I know you talk about treasure hunting. You can look for something that you can appreciate or validate about him. That can really make a big difference. Sometimes a small thing can make a big difference. And so I think a lot of these men that we might say, oh, they're narcissistic, they're workable. I mean, there's still something of value in the relationship that you can work with.
It makes me sad to hear so many women say to other women, run, leave him, because we don't know whether he falls up. What if he's traits? What if he just has traits of it? Does that mean that he shouldn't be married to anyone because he's not worthy of a good man? Like, that doesn't really feel right.
Well, and we shouldn't ever tell somebody else what to do, and we don't know that whole story.
Yeah.
We cannot advise somebody on run from somebody when the problem might actually be with what the woman's saying. She may give you just a slice of the story. You don't know him. Right. You don't know the story. You don't know any of the background. So actually don't ever tell somebody to run when you don't know them.
Right.
Because it's a very serious thing. It can ruin their life.
But I think this is where maybe boundaries come in. And you do a whole chapter on boundaries where you talk about what limits that you can accept and how to negotiate boundaries and come to some agreement between you as to what is going to work with your relationship and what isn't. And to me, that's a tough balance, but I think that it's important.
Is it fair to say that most of the men that fall under the more healthy or just traits portion, is it fair to say that they probably just would love a lot more validation from you?
I would say most men are more in that trait area. Mm-hmm. Occasionally you'll see that high functioning, movie star, person that's a professor, somebody that's excelled in something.
A politician, somebody has
an inventor. He's done something with, we met the man who invented or who put together Word Perfect. And, there's people who are high functioning like that. And you think, well, they're kind of self-centered, but no, they're confident. They're just confident people. A lot of people with traits. There's some people though, unfortunately, and I sometimes think we kind of lump this in with toxic masculinity.
Right. Yeah.
To me, there's healthy masculinity, and there's probably some toxic masculinity as well, in a sense. I mean, that's a tricky thing to say because true masculinity, I don't believe, is toxic. That's just criminal and abusive.
Just bad behavior.
Just bad behavior.
Yeah.
What are some things that women can really educate themselves on a little bit more if they find themselves more in that healthy or traits, kind of a narcissist, a little bit of a narcissist in her husband, and she's trying to make a better marriage, but she's struggling with that?
Can I say a real simple answer? Read Fascinating Womanhood for the Timeless Woman. It's got a whole section on understanding men, and
don't diagnose him.
Yeah, don't diagnose him.
Because to say a narcissist is to say, oh, he has a disorder, and that isn't helpful. Mm-hmm. Better to treasure hunt and look at the wonderful. Why did you marry him? Look at the reasons you married him. Look for the good in him and maybe write it down if you have to, and validate everything you can see that's good and positive, and work on yourself, accepting at face value, working to build your own character, patience, admiration. We have so much work to do with ourselves that there's not as much time to try and look at him and see what's wrong with him.
Yeah, and I think that in a way men really crave like validation and acceptance and admiration.
But for the women that find that they might actually have a bit of a rat, a guy that's really on that dangerous kind of destructive, those are the women that need to get professional, if they can.
Yes,
professional advice.
They're probably not going to get him in there, but they can get it.
Get some professional advice.
If you've been reading Fascinating Womanhood and you've been applying some of these things, but there's still, abusive, sadistic, aggressive, predatory kind of behaviors, I found that the best thing to do is, maybe minimize your contact with this person, maybe even get away from them. But again, you can't say that to somebody. That's a very personal decision. I don't say, you need to do this or you need to do that. That's something we can't say.
You don't really say that even with patients that you see in person.
I don't say that.
No.
I think a person has to decide those things for themselves, because some people will put up with a fair bit of abuse and mistreatment.
Maybe their father was like that. That's what
even
they
when
know.
maybe they shouldn't, but sometimes they kind of come to expect this, possibly because someone else in their life before.
So the final question, and I think you've already answered it, but I'm just going to say it. Does Fascinating Womanhood work on narcissistic behavior? I think you've already answered it, but it works. Yes, it works is a bad word, I think.
I would say,
because character is part of that. Is character. What character works? It works to be honest. It works to be patient. It works to be long-suffering. But what do you mean by work?
Is it helpful? Is it helpful in a relationship?
I think it's helpful because what I really like about Fascinating Womanhood is it focuses on you and what you can do. It doesn't say, here's how to change a narcissist. It says, here's what you can do about you and have an influence.
And how you can understand him.
And that includes setting boundaries, appropriate boundaries. Like, I cannot put up with physical abuse. I'm just not going to do it.
Right.
Those kind of boundaries where you just, or infidelity. I'm just not doing it.
Right.
And if this happens, I will do this.
Well, I see people say a man has an affair, or one of the partners has an affair. I can see that being repaired, but typically if there's more than one, or maybe, I don't know, maybe one or two, if it goes beyond that, to me, that's really difficult to repair that trust.
Right.
So if you've got a serial cheater, that's never going to really go anywhere good.
Right. Okay. This has been really great. But thank you guys so much for being here and talking with us about this. Yeah.
Thank you so much for watching. I hope you learned a lot. I hope this was a helpful subject. And if you have any comments, please mention them down below. I'm also going to attach links to purchase Dixie's book, her workbooks, and all the places that you can find us on social media will all be down below. And we'll see you next time. Bye.
See ya. Bye.